Good evening, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is April 5th, 2023. We've got a great show for you today. I'm joined, as always, by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford. How are you, Nigel?
Great, thanks. Ready to go.
Actually, I realized we're having a blue suit convention today.
Yep. Well, I thought you were the one who sent the memo.
Just so everyone's watching at home, we do not coordinate what we're wearing, besides basic office dress codes. We've also got Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan and host of the Cory Morgan Show with us. Mr. Cory Morgan, how are you doing?
Very good, Mr. Fildebrandt.
Did you get a new haircut or new glasses or something? You look
both, actually. Yes, I've tried a whole revamping. I'm glad you noticed.
The Botox looks great.
Thanks.
Great.
I'm going to do the lips next.
Yeah. It's April 5th, so I would be remiss if I didn't note that on April 1st, we like to engage in a little bit of fake news on April 1st, April Fool's Day. We've been doing this since we founded the Western Standard. We try to trick the readers, especially those early morning readers. You know, you're laying in bed, groggy, looking at your phone, scrolling through the stories, and we had a great one. We'll pull it up on the screen here. Actually, it was that the federal government, federal budget was funding $100 billion to repurpose one lane of the Trans-Canada Highway to be repurposed as bike lanes. Now we had an unofficial vote on this in the newsroom here, and we came to that because it sounded so damn plausible. And boy, we fooled a lot of people. Some pretty high-profile people too. We got them on the April Fools because I don't think it was that. It is outrageous, but it seems like something the federal government would do, which is why I think it was so effective.
I don't know whether you've looked at the stats, but we're still fooling people on that.
Yeah, we're still
there's been 2,000 hits on that since April the 1st. I just hope these guys actually do read to the end.
But because it's not April 1st anymore, they might be thinking this is just real, and you don't know it's like for sure until you get to the very last line that says April Fools. But I mean, you should by the time it's pretty outrageous by the time we ramp up.
It's worse and worse as you go through the.
As you scroll through the article, it starts like pretty serious at the top. By the time at the bottom, like you really should.
Danielle Smith going to invoke the Sovereignty Act and so forth.
Maybe not too bad, but you know, the Quebec Premier François Legault says he'll only allow it through Quebec if Alberta pays for it, and Muslim women are not allowed to wear head coverings with their bicycle helmets. That sounds entirely plausible as well.
To some people.
It's something Quebec would do. Something they would do. Okay, well, let's get on to it. We've got a good show today. We're going to talk about, you all know that former U.S. President Donald Trump has been indicted on some kind of campaign finance charges related to alleged hush money paid to former porn star Stormy Daniels. We're not going to talk about that itself, but we're going to talk about the bigger term ramifications of that, because it's not unprecedented that, let's say, for instance, Donald Trump did do this, he's guilty of a crime. He would be very far from the first U.S. president to commit a crime. I think you'd have a hard time mentioning a single U.S. president who hasn't committed a crime. But they don't seem to prosecute him. So this is changing a lot of precedent, and it has the potential to radically alter the nature of the American Republic and presidential system. So we're going to talk about kind of the slippery slope that could come with the Trump indictment. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she's going to sue the CBC. Maybe. You've probably been following along the story where the Smith government in Alberta has been accused of attempting to meddle with Crown prosecutors involving some of these kind of crazy COVID cases where people have been facing charges for not obeying lockdown orders and mandates and things like that. And a lot of what they've come up with, they've not provided proof for. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she's going to sue the CBC, but they have a month to correct the record and apologize. That's a bit unusual, and we're going to talk about why. And defunding the police. Remember defunding the police, guys? Remember that? That was all the rage, roughly 2 years ago? Defund the police. And we had it right across Canada. Politicians, largely the municipal level, some at the provincial and federal level with, NDP types, creeping a little towards the Liberals. Liberals weren't that dumb to do it, but they would got to pay homage to some of the rhetoric around it. Well, defunding the police. We've had no one in Canada's gone full Seattle and totally defunded the police, which boy, Seattle worked out well. We're gonna have to talk about the Seattle example. That lasted a hot minute before it ended up in a Mad Max hellscape. But some politicians did act on reducing police budgets. People like Calgary Mayor Jody Gondek, who it's kind of put in a tight spot now as we have this epidemic of urban violence, particularly but not exclusively centered around areas of mass transit. We've got stabbing sprees, people just being killed in random acts of violence. And I'm sure more social workers is exactly what's going to fix this. Before we get into it, though, I want to thank my favorite sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I've been a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association for well over a decade because I trust them as Canada's leading firearms rights groups. Without the CSSA fighting for firearms owners, the federal government would have likely seized virtually all of our firearms by now. They are leading the fight to, at the very least, try to slow down the pace of gun confiscations and persecution of gun owners in Canada, and doing absolutely great work. And so if you're a firearms owner or just licensed for firearms, you don't be getting the free ride on this. You need to support the fight and join the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Go to CSSA-CILA.org or do what I do. Google them, click on membership, and join up. It's worth absolutely every penny. While you're at it, you should sign up for the Western Standard too, eh? I think so.
Great idea.
Yeah, we're one of the only media in all of Canada that refuse to take the federal government's bailout money. Go to westernstandard.news and click on membership. It's only $100 a year or $10 a month for unlimited access, supporting independent journalism, and you'll have total access through our paywall to all of our content. All right, let's get into it. We don't talk much American politics on the pipeline or the Western Standard in general. There's enough going on north of the border, and we tend to focus more on the West than elsewhere, and federal issues affecting the West. But we just can't avoid it this week. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been indicted on, I think, 35 counts of technically falsifying tax documents to
Business
records to cover up the alleged crime.
34 counts.
Yeah, all involving hush money to alleged hush money paid to former porn star Stormy Daniels. We're not going to get into. I don't want to get into too much about if it's true or not. I've read some stuff that this is bunk. The other, but there's always going to be two sides on this. It's very political. I don't want to get into how legitimate the charges are or not. But we have to keep in mind in the United States, in many places, the prosecution or district attorneys are elected positions. This is something we're not really familiar with in Canada. These are elected positions, and it's not all, they're partisan. You run as a Republican and you run as a Democrat. In this case, it was a Democrat, and he ran on a platform of indicting Trump. It's something kind of beyond the way we think about these things, and I think we should probably elect more positions in Canada, but electing prosecutors seems really dodgy to me. And this would...
Seeing the consequence of it.
We're seeing the consequence of this. Now, I want to focus on not... First, we'll talk... We know it's political. There's no sense in getting into that. We know it's political. I don't think any side would deny that. Question is this a good idea? And the way I see it, there's... let's just... So we could talk in the abstract on this. Let's take as a granted, which is not true. We'll take as a granted, Trump is guilty. He has done something illegal. Okay. Well, there's almost certainly never been a president, even a choir boy like George Washington, minus owning slaves, who's ever broken the law. And that wasn't against the law at that time.
Sir, he was guilty of treason.
Well, he was guilty of treason against the British Crown. That's entirely true. Yeah.
So anyway.
Virtually every president has broken the law at some point, but none of them have ever been charged, let alone convicted of anything. I think there's kind of two schools of thought. One is, well, they should be held accountable. Presidents break the law. They should be held accountable like anyone else. And that's a fair argument to be made. But that means we would have to indict probably every living U.S. president, a former U.S. president, except for maybe Jimmy Carter. He's probably a bad president, but he was a choir boy. I'm not aware of any laws that he's broken. But Obama ordered targeted drone strikes on American citizens, guys who did deserve to die, but were killed illegally. These were extrajudicial killings. Obama could be brought up on first-degree murder. Bill Clinton could be brought up on many counts of perjury. But you don't do this in America. And I think the idea is that you don't. A lot of these banana republics in other parts of the world, the former president is always thrown in prison for corruption, abuse of power of some kind,
Tax fraud.
Yes, something, and
Yeah.
it kind of denigrates the kind of people you're going to attract to the office. So I know this has been a long rambling setup here. I apologize, but it's a big topic. If we just take as a granted, which is not fair, but we take as granted, say Trump did break the law here, would it still be right to charge him in this case?
Depends what you think of the offense in question. I mean, if a former president is arrested for drunk driving, yeah, he should probably face the charge. However, in this case, it is so clearly aimed at the 2024 election and setting up the situation for that. He's arraigned today, or yesterday, so what are we talking about? April the 4th, 2023. Nothing happens until January 2024, which is right when the next election starts.
What's that?
First with the primaries and then with everything else. This case, I am told, now keep in mind, I am not an expert on American law. However, those who I regard as credible in this matter say that these charges are misdemeanors, that the statute of limitations has run out on them, and that the only way that they could be brought together is to say, well, we're pursuing them because they were done to conceal a greater crime, which would be a felony. Therefore, they can stand. Well, what's the greater crime? Well, we're not going to tell you. So this is, I believe, on the basis of what I've heard, that this will not stand up. It will fold. But meanwhile, the whole Republican Party, and Trump in particular, has been put on an 8-month distraction. Just like so much of the rest of his presidency was subjected to distractions, which seemed legitimate at the time. You know, the Russia investigation, the Ukraine
Turned out to be
investigation,
BS, yeah. BS.
all turned out to be
Nothing.
nothing there. But while he had to address that, he was prevented from paying attention to other things that would have been better occupied at president's time. So the whole thing is political. That's not unusual, I guess, for things to be political at the national level in any country. But the United States has always traded on being a democratic superpower. The Second World War, the massive production, arsenal, democracy. Democracy was the fundamental virtue. In Iraq, what were they trying to do? Bring democracy. In Afghanistan.
No, that was the excuse after they couldn't find weapons of mass destruction.
Well, sure, but in Afghanistan,
it became
the
their
same thing.
reason.
So, if you're going to hold yourself up as a model of democracy, you can't have a system where governments change and the new government prosecutes the old government. That's how it happens in many third world countries, some South American countries, places where nobody pretends that they're truly democratic. The United States has to operate to a higher standard. And this kind of political prosecution, boy, it can go both ways. In the saddle today, under the horse's hooves tomorrow. Right now, is Trump under the gun? Could be a Democrat president when the power changes. This was a foolish move by the Democrats.
So, Cory, it's what I want to get into. This is with precedent. My reading of it, which is entirely amateur, it looks pretty weak. They don't seem to have some smoking gun that he did anything wrong. It looks more like when they got Al Capone on tax evasion.
Yeah.
So maybe he did something. Maybe, I don't know. But it looks pretty minor. But, you look at, even good presidents like Reagan. Reagan and George H.W. Bush, they had a RAND contract. Clearly broke the law. But, Nothing happened to them. Bill Clinton clearly broke the law. Nothing happened to him. Obama clearly broke the law to kill some guys who deserve to be killed, but clearly broke the law in doing so. And it's kind of it's been an unsaid thing that presidents don't get charged. It was maybe epitomized by Nixon when he said, if the president does it, it's not against the law. Something to that effect he said in his famous Frost interview, which is kind of a maximalist view of presidential powers and a very dangerous view, I think. But it's largely been accepted. Do you think this is win, lose, or draw, whatever happens legally? I think the seal's broken here. Republican, there's also elected Republican prosecutors in America too, a lot of them. Do you think this is going to just start a huge round of legal political recriminations where the legal system is now used to go after Biden, Obama?
Absolutely. I mean, you've opened that up, and it's unfortunately it's a reflection of how vitriolic and divided that country has become. I know, the listeners always get on my case when I put it, I don't like Trump. I want to see that man in the rearview mirror. I'm sick of hearing about Trump. I want to see a good Republican come up and have Trump in the history books. Now, this action has done two things. It's let him play victim. It's going to keep him in the news for the next 6 months. And yes, the Republicans are going to be scrambling and distracted and won't be able to deal with their primaries correctly. And as you said, it's unprecedented. I mean, you have to use some judgment. A president isn't above the law. If a former president went out and stabbed somebody, you take them in and you
they'll be post being president. But presidents have killed people illegally in office all the time. Every president's killed people.
Yes.
Sometimes outside the law.
It's a case-by-case thing. This wasn't the pressing thing that they needed to turn the nation upside down on and go after. It's pure vindictive approach, going after a man that the Democrat establishment despises is an unfortunate sign of what happens when you elect prosecutors. Yeah, they're going to follow on partisan lines when they really should, be following that blind justice. It's a disturbing precedent on all levels. And I'm saying this as somebody who has no love of Trump, but this is not good for the United States at all.
Well, you hinted into this, Cory. Will this actually help Trump? So Trump, as a former U.S. president, obviously comes into the Republican primary or Republican nomination with a huge lead. But Ron DeSantis has been making pretty good inroads. He wasn't in spitting distance, but he was in throwing distance, which is impressive. Ron DeSantis really distinguished himself during COVID as really one of the first leaders in the world, and first I'm aware of, at least in the Western world, to break the consensus around lockdowns and mandates, and he threw it completely out the window, and he set off a chain reaction that kind of ended here in Alberta, actually. In no small way, probably helped result in actually Danielle Smith winning the UCP leadership, and quite the domino effect he started. And so he's had an outside chance, but a legitimate chance for the Republican nomination, offering, some have said, Trumpism without Trump. That you can have a lot of the policies and things that he stands for without kind of the narcissism that comes with Donald Trump. But a poll that came out, that kind of did an overnight poll after the indictment, and Trump's now just got a huge lead. Maybe that's just short term here. We'll start with you, Nigel. Is this going to help Donald Trump, I guess maybe in two parts, with the primary election to get the Republican nomination, and then two, possibly with the general election?
Okay, if you want to be deeply conspiratorial about this, yes, it will help him in the primary because there's a huge sympathy factor. People who voted for Trump, people who like Trump, are scandalized by the fact that the old convention, once you're out of office, they leave you alone with your conscience. They're going to rally to his cause. He will probably sweep away with the nomination. The second part of it is what you referred to about the actual election itself. Now, the margins are incredibly, without getting into the whole, January the 6th thing, it was a close run election. Mm-hmm. You didn't need to move a lot of people from one side to the other side to bring about a different result. So what do the Democrats do? They create this massive paintbrush of a smear. It ensures that he gets the nomination, they, perhaps foolishly, but they regard him as the weaker candidate, the one that they could more easily destroy.
Well, most of the data supports that you know,
Yeah.
DeSantis would wipe the floor with Biden. Many Republicans would, but Trump has got his hardcore base. But a lot of Republicans have soured on Trump in the last couple of years.
So, you know, maybe this is one of the spin-offs of this would be get the candidate that they want. They better be careful what they wish for, because I know there was a time when I can't speak for the Conservative Party, when I was saying, oh yeah, let it be Justin Trudeau. What a lightweight, you know, all hair and teeth. And of course, now we've had 7.5 years of Justin Trudeau, and it's been a very, very bad thing for the country. So you can call these things wrong, and I certainly did. Maybe the Democrats will call that wrong too. You just don't know how these, like 10 months away, man, that's a long time 18 months away for the general election, 19 months. It's who knows what can happen. For heaven's sake, you could have a heart attack and die. So could Biden. You just don't know how these things are going to break. But I'm sure that that's in the back of their minds. They'd rather face Trump the second time than DeSantis for a first time.
Corey, do you think this helps Trump? I guess kind of two-part. Win the Republican nomination, is DeSantis got no hope now at this point? And then second, if Trump does get the nomination, is this going to help or hurt him?
I won't go as far as saying that DeSantis has no hope, but this plays right into what Trump likes to do. He's a victim of the establishment. They're coming to get me, and they're rigging the game.
They are playing into the narrative he's building here.
And that's how he loves to play, and that galvanizes his supporters, and it brings them out. And he campaigned, in a sense, as an anti-establishment person the time he won. I mean, Pennsylvania, areas like that, working class people saying, I'm going to stand up to the machine, the system. And right now, the machine, the system does seem to be coming after him, and it gives him an ability to play that. Now, that may or may not, if he wins the nomination, I think it strengthens him for it for sure. And if he does win it, as we said, you know, it's hard to predict. As Nigel said, there could be an unintended consequence. If he plays that right, markets it right, he could suddenly end up becoming president again. And boy, what a wild 4 years we're in for then.
And what do you want to bet? That there's going to be some Republican prosecutor somewhere who's now going to go look at this Democrat prosecutor and try to find some grain to get him for malicious prosecution? I think we're entering a really dangerous period here. And I'm not sure what the right answer is. Political recriminations and throwing all your ex-presidents in jail does not work for countries that do that. But at the same time, you break the law, you should be held accountable. I'm not really sure what the right way is to go. All I do know is if you're going to charge presidents, you have to charge all of them for which we know they've broken crimes. And boy, it could get pretty crowded in cell block P.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to move on now, bringing it a little closer to home. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith started as kind of a CBC story here, trying to gin up a scandal. It goes back a while. Those of you who have watched The Pipeline know the background of this story, that Danielle Smith was accused by the CBC of interfering with prosecutors who are going after people who were charged for violating lockdowns and mandates and all this silly stuff that happened under the Kennedy government.
Prosecutors who weren't even elected.
Yes. Yes. Well, we're still dealing with prosecutors here. Quite the segue. I hadn't even put that together. The CBC's whole story was based on emails from the Smith's premier's office to the prosecutors. After that story came out, the CBC was forced to admit they actually never saw the emails. They just talked to someone who says the emails exist. Okay, well, that's not quite the solid story they were saying. Not saying the emails don't exist, but it was an important detail the CBC left out of the original story. CBC's continued on this. There was a call, we talked about it last week, with Calgary street preacher Arthur Pawlowski, where she says she doesn't have the power to pardon him and stuff, so I'm not really sure what the problem was. But either way, the Smith now has come out and said, CBC, retract the story or I'm going to sue you. Okay, that sort of made sense. But what got me was, and you have until the end of April to do it, a month. Now, if you've ever gotten a defamation notice before, you're normally given 24 hours. That's pretty standard. You got 24 hours to meet this condition, and this condition. Otherwise, we're going to sue your. Can't swear anymore. We're on cable. Crap. We're going to sue your behind. But they gave them a month. We'll start with you, Corey. Why? Does that look fishy to you? Like, is that weird?
Something I don't like saying very often, but I don't know. It is weird, that I'll grant. I mean, as you said, if there's something untrue, there's something that's damaging, then you as the victim of it, you want that gone as soon as possible.
Yeah.
You want the retraction as quickly as possible if you're going to get one, or, move forward. You don't say, that's really damaging and unfair and hurtful and wrong, and I'm going to put up with it for another month until you reconsider it. So it's unusual, and I can't see the benefit in giving such an extended notice on this. Is drawing a line in the sand way over
Well, there is another line in the sand that takes place around that exact same time. The writ drops for the official election period to begin. Maybe it's because they want a story of like, okay, we gave the CBC all this time, and we're going to sue them now. I don't know.
Could be.
Well, that's kind of the way I was thinking about it. I was, that's brave of you to say, I don't know, because I was getting ready to mouth those words. And then suddenly I thought, wait a minute, this gives her a good story right as the election starts, right as the writ drops. Because this whole story, as it has played out so far, and we don't know the end of it, but as it has played out so far, is a classic smear. You put something out there, the other side denies it. The denial is never as persuasive as the original allegation. And now there will be people who go to their grave, if they still care about this, saying, they never could prove it, Well, there was something there, or the CBC wouldn't have said it.
Well, look, it is possible the CBC's right.
Well, it is.
I don't think it's likely, but it's possible they are.
I can't
But
imagine why they would put themselves out there so far.
I'm mixed.
They don't have
Because
something.
I know some of you are going to get angry because I'm going to say there are some good journalists at the CBC. And I know some of the ones who worked on this story.
Mhm.
And, they're serious people, serious journalists. But I kind of raised my eyebrow when they published the original story saying, emails show blah, 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 blah. And then they had to correct their own story and say, well, we haven't seen the emails. We talked to a guy who says he saw emails. So I have two minds on this. And also I don't know.
I'm pretty confident those emails don't exist. I think perhaps, obviously the CBC reporters were confident that they did. But at this point, with the amount of grief, with the amount of stuff that's gone on, if somebody could even take screen snaps of them and have forwarded them to the CBC or something.
Or just hold the phone out for the CBC reporter.
So
say,
he could say,
I don't have them, but I've seen them.
Yes, and that hasn't happened. They never even could admit that they even saw them. So that's reporting on a rumor. And there's a lot of danger in that, So I suspect those don't exist.
So, no, it looks like a smear job that backfired. And the best explanation for the 30 days is just it makes a better story is that she goes into the election.
But is it a good story? Because
clear to the CBC
sure.
backs down under threat of suit. That's not a bad
story.
If
the CBC backs down. But here's the thing about the CBC. They're not a private company like the Western Standard. We get a defamation notice. Even if we're pretty confident in the story, there's a huge financial incentive to retract it anyway because we don't have a bottomless pit of money. But you know who does have a bottomless pit of money? The federal government and the CBC. The CBC gets more than $1 billion a year. And do you want to bet for a minute that if Danielle Smith beat the CBC and got maximum damages, that Justin Trudeau wouldn't turn around and just make them whole and cut a check? They don't have any shareholders to answer to. They have no economic incentives to answer to. The federal government would just turn around and say, okay, Danielle Smith won $5 million. Here's a check for $5 million.
Well, that's true, but boy, the reputational damage would be quite large.
Yes, it would.
If I were the CBC, I wouldn't want that.
No, but they have the ability to fight it in court to its maximum extent. So if they think they've got any, if a big guy comes at you and threatens to sue you, you got to be pretty confident you're going to win because the financial resources of going to court are so enormous. But if a big guy is threatening to sue a big guy, those things do go to trial because they both got limitless resources to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The CBC has limitless resources to pursue this. So if the CBC thinks they've got better than a 25% chance of winning, they'd probably go to court. And at the very least, it punts the issue out for years before this thing would actually get solved. It'll go for years and years and years, long after the provincial election.
So somewhere down in the CBC office, there is a conversation that is either taken place or has to take place at some point, where the people working on that story get pulled into the office and say, who actually saw these emails? Did you see them? Well, actually, no.
Oh, they admit they didn't see them.
They didn't. That's right. So who was it who said that they had seen them? Well, I can't tell you that. Look, we're all in the room together. This is serious stuff. Are we confident? And there'll be a kind of a shakedown of who is visibly sweating. Okay, So, all of what you say is true about the limitless resource, but on a year-to-year basis, they still have budgets to meet, and there's some,
I think the only damage would be reputational for the CBC.
Huge.
As long as Trudeau is still prime minister, he would simply write them a check. And also, $5 million would be considered like record damages for defamation in Canada. $5 million. The CBC doesn't sweat $5 million. It's nothing. So they can afford even to pay, even after legal fees, they can afford to pay maximum damages and not really have a significant financial impact to the bottom line. Their only impact would be reputationally.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be big. So.
I don't know, but is there a win for Smith in this? Because
I'm sure she just wants this issue to disappear, though. I mean, this is one where you could see they're trying to widen a crack. They're trying to build mistrust. I'm not talking just about the CBC, but opponents politically. This is a case of mistrust. It's he said, she said, or whatnot. And
well, that was the intention of the smear in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just, even if there's nothing there, you create that little bit of smoke.
Well, that's again, if it's a smear.
That's what recently happened, though, is they kind of brought it all up again and threw it in, and it turns out there was no new revelations in this. You just regurgitated the story with a video clip attached to it. I mean, Smith just wants this story out of the scroll, which again is why I'm surprised it's dragging out.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of parallel. I don't take it as granted that this is a smear and that there is nothing here. I will accept there's a possibility that it happened. I mean, it was a new government that came in. They had like no staff. They kind of stumbled into the office because they had to get Kenny out in 24 hours after she became Smith, after Smith became premier, because he was continuing to govern in his own right, not act as an interim premier. So they kind of stumbled into the premier's office. They expected to go in, but there was no transition that you traditionally have. We've talked about this before. It's possible an accident happened. I don't know. On balance of things, it doesn't look like it was likely true, but I think there's a possibility it is.
Well, you'd have to ask yourself, well, what's the CBC hanging on to it for if it's all true and they've got the proof? Put it out there. Are we holding it for the election?
No, not necessarily. It is possible. CBC's telling the truth, but they can't burn their source. And that's a really dicey thing, because to defend yourself in court,
you should be able to expose the emails without burning the source, even a screen snap of them.
Yeah.
Or, as Nigel said, just have one of the reporters say, yes, the source showed me and I saw the email. And they can't even do that. So,
yeah, no, they haven't even seen an email held on a screen up to them. They can't even say that. And that's pretty flimsy. Yeah.
I don't think we'd go for that in our newsroom, would we?
No.
I want to float something really creepy past you.
But I can see that.
I've seen the email, Derek. But no,
but I can see the temptation, especially if the source is someone we trust. Like, let's say it's someone we all know. This is a good guy. He's a friend. He wouldn't screw us. And he comes and says, Nigel, I saw an email that says, I'm not even going to joke. He'll get me sued. I saw an email from Justin Trudeau to a guy admitting to murder. I'd be like, oh, that's a big story. That's a big story. I want us to break that story, and we trust this guy. But he won't even show you the email. Taking him on his word. I can see the temptation's there. You're going to break a huge story, make a career out of it.
Or end one.
Yeah. Or end one.
Yeah.
But like you can see the temptation for a journalist to do that. But that's part of our jobs, is resisting that temptation as much as possible. Okay.
They say on cable news, time will tell.
Yeah. Time will tell. All right. We're going to keep it, kind of go nationwide, but a little bit, some relevant here in Alberta. Remember 2 years ago, following the murder of George Floyd, this was, he was a criminal, being rightfully arrested in the United States, it seems, but the police officer used bizarrely excessive force and put him in essentially a chokehold with his knee. Guy saying, "I can't breathe," and he dies. And the police officer, Derek Chauvin, convicted of murder. And I think rightfully so. But this sparked the Black Lives Matter thing, which initially I was like, oh, okay, well, I think police brutality is an important issue and some of this is relevant. And then it kind of spun way out of control and it became kind of a racial, social justice warrior, woke mob. And they started getting into defund the police. And defund the police became really in vogue saying with a lot of lefty politicians and activists for a while. We saw it right across Canada to different extents. You saw Justin Trudeau take a knee and bow to BLM. You had a lot of mayors or municipal politicians sort of adopt the language around defund the police. Mm-hmm. Here in Calgary, we had Jyoti Gondek. Now, she was a city councillor at the time, not yet the mayor, but she advocated for and voted for measures to, as much as possible, defund the police. There was no proposal I'm aware of to go as far as Seattle did, which was to defund the police, which resulted in gang lords seizing power within 24 hours, going around executing people. It was like a scene from Mad Max. I think they had like vegan collectives and stuff in the streets until they all starved and ran out of food. It was pretty funny. We didn't go that far, but they definitely, they cut the police budget, try to reallocate it to some squishier things. You saw this in Edmonton too. And now it's been 2 years and we've got lower police budgets. We've had an epidemic of violence. We're now going through a stabbing spree across Canada, including right here in Calgary. You just hop onto the LRT lines and you'll see just those LRTs have become, hold up that, Corey's got a map here, just the kind of the crime by.
See that, yeah. So the crime lines, the heat map with the darker orange zones are actually coincidentally all right along the LRT lines throughout the city. So it appears there's quite a correlation between
it's a crime pipeline.
Crime and the
no one wants to go on this. City of Calgary says we're going to spend billions of dollars for the green lines, but more people use transit. Maybe get the stabby meth heads off. That'll get people back on.
Start there, yeah.
Let's start with the stabby meth heads. But no. So anyway, this kind of came to a head. Yesterday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith stood with some police chiefs and Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek, who has previously called for defunding the police. And she was asked a question. I think it was a bit of a loaded question. The overall intent of the question, I think, was fair and relevant. It was a bit loaded, but she didn't really like getting asked tough questions. Let's roll that.
Question for Mayor Gondek, Kean with the counter signal. Just a handful of months ago, you were fighting tooth and nail against increasing the police budget, and you were actively supporting defund the police rhetoric. I'm just wondering, when you realized that police forces were not optional, did it take the random stabbings, wives getting stabbed, police officers getting killed, to realize that it was important to fund police departments? And how can Calgarians trust you when you flip-flop on basic issues like public safety?
So, you saw there that Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek not very happy about getting asked this question. Again, it was a bit of a loaded question, but I think overall the intent of it was quite fair and relevant. Just no response. I'll start with you, Corey. What would have been the appropriate way for Jyoti Gondek, who had very clearly supported the defund the police movement before she was mayor, but when she was a city councillor, now standing there beside provincial politicians and chiefs, accepting more money for the police?
Well, I mean, a good, smart political answer would say circumstances have changed from that time until today, and we reevaluated things. But with the addiction epidemic and other changing factors, the lockdowns have really, shaken things up, and clearly crime has just become more acute. And we obviously have to get some more boots on the ground to protect Calgarians. There, I could have written that and given it to her. It would look a lot better than a blank stare for 3 seconds and storming away from the microphone.
Be a BS political answer, but at least B. I mean,
as a mayor, she should be good enough to come up with that.
Yeah, any politician could pull that out of their back pocket. Jody Gondek is, again, I don't want to get too into the weeds for Calgary. We've got a national audience here. But she's, kind of a symbol for that BLM and defund the police movement. Where have these guys gone? I know in Seattle they were murdered by their own gang lords who seized power and a few square blocks in their vegan collective. But where have these advocates gone?
Well, they very wisely stayed silent, because there really isn't. The whole message of defund the police was misinterpreted by the criminal element. It came out of the incident that you described with the George Floyd murder. And people could get that an aggressive police force needed to be restrained, if in fact it was aggressive. And there
has been a militarization of the police. Like, you look at some of these guys, they look like they're SEAL Team 6.
There was the video evidence of it. However, what the criminal element heard is that defund the police, great, anything goes. So if we got a problem, we can work it out on the LRT. We can either go someplace and lift some property, cause some damage, do some crime, whatever is advantageous. We can shoot up on the LRT. We can make
it shag on the LRT.
Apparently
now.
So. That's a well-watched video.
So if you haven't seen it, yeah, we've got the video up on the Edmonton LRT of a couple engaging in.
They're having it away under a blanket right there on the LRT, and meanwhile, there's somebody sitting back there thinking, "I can't believe what I'm seeing. I got to film this," and we ended up with the video. So, defunding the police sends a message that nobody is paying attention to what's going on around them anymore. Nobody cares. You can trace it all the way back to the broken window theory that Rudy Giuliani brought in New York. Once you start showing that you care, the crime goes down. When you show that you don't care, and that's what defund the police says to the criminal mind, well, then guess what? Up goes criminal elements, criminal acts. So that's what's happened here. And you asked the question, where have these people gone? They are stupid, but they're not so stupid as to stand by that original recommendation when manifestly it doesn't work.
They've just shut up.
Really. They shut up, and let's hope they stay that way.
Cory, when the defund the police thing happened, there was originally some interesting writing that I thought was actually worth paying attention to. And these weren't people saying defund the police, but it was like demilitarize the police. And,
you could talk about reforming them. I mean, I think people would agree there were cultural problems, there were structural problems, and that's what's leading to police officers acting out. I mean, look to that. But where on earth, with anything else we say, this system is failing, so the best thing we could do for it is to take the money away from it. The healthcare system saying we should defund it and make it a little better. Or education, let's defund the teachers and our children will all get A's. I mean, it's absurd. But the trend went and the wave went, and some politicians actually followed through with it. And we're seeing the fruit of it. What it did was demoralize police. And that also led to, I think, further acting out on officers that weren't acting properly. It was an unintended consequence. But I think, as Nigel said, they realize how naive and how much this backfired. And the wiser ones are just, we'll just kind of slip into the background on this one and wait for the next issue.
I mean, there are instances. You get a person with mental illness, and they're having problems. They have a bad day. They become suicidal, and they want the police to shoot them. So they run out of the house with
suicide by police,
dagger and threaten people and so forth.
It's absolute.
So the argument is, well, we need less police and more social workers. But, a social worker who wants to jump into that situation is going to be a rare find.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Nigel, Cory, thank you for joining me today. And thank all of you for joining us on The Pipeline and the Western Standard. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please go to westernstandard.news. Click on membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year to join us to get full access to all Western Standard content, past that pesky paywall that I know you keep on hitting against. You'll be supporting independent media. We are one of probably about 3, maybe 4 media in the entire country that refuse to accept the federal government's media bailout. And we rely on advertisers like the Canadian Shooting Sports Association and direct support from members like you. So sign up today. Thank you very much for joining us, and God bless. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access